The conference room at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam fell silent the moment Captain Nadia Volkov walked through the door. She wasn't supposed to be there. The emergency briefing had been called for combat-ready pilots only, and the three-star admiral chairing the meeting had made it abundantly clear that desk jockeys weren't welcome. But Nadia had learned long ago that permissions were just suggestions when lives were on the line. She wore her Navy working uniform with the same casual confidence most people wore sweatpants, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow looked deliberately careless. The silver trident on her chest caught the fluorescent light as she moved to take a seat in the back row. Commander Hastings, the admiral's aide, spotted her immediately. His face flushed red as he stood, pointing toward the door with barely controlled rage. The room held perhaps 40 officers, mostly men, mostly younger than her 38 years. They turned to watch what promised to be entertaining. "Captain Volkov, this briefing is classified for active flight personnel only," Hastings announced, his voice carrying that particular tone of bureaucratic satisfaction. "You've been grounded for administrative review. That means you're not cleared for tactical operations." Nadia didn't move. She simply looked at him with those ice-blue eyes that had stared down insurgents in Kandahar and drug runners off the coast of Colombia. "I'm aware of my status, Commander," she said quietly. Hastings took a step closer, his jaw tight. "Then you're also aware that you need to remove yourself from this briefing immediately. In fact, Captain, I'm going to need you to take off your uniform insignia. Your flight status has been suspended pending investigation into the Okinawa incident." The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Someone in the third row actually whistled low under their breath. Asking a pilot to remove their wings was the bureaucratic equivalent of a public execution. It was personal. It was designed to humiliate. Nadia stood slowly, and for just a moment Hastings looked satisfied. Then she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had survived 6 years as one of the only women in naval special warfare, who had earned her SEAL trident through the same hellish training that broke 80% of the men who attempted it, who had flown 63 combat missions across 4 continents before most of the officers in this room had finished their bachelor's degrees. "Commander," she said softly, "you just told a Navy SEAL to strip." The admiral, who had been watching with mild interest from the front of the room, suddenly sat forward. His eyes narrowed as he actually looked at Nadia's uniform for the first time. The trident, the jump wings, the ribbons that told a story most people couldn't read. "Hastings, sit down," the admiral said quietly. But Hastings was already too far gone, his authority challenged in front of 36 witnesses. "Admiral, regulations are clear. She's grounded and she needs to." A phone rang. Not a cell phone, but the red secure line mounted on the wall near the front of the room. The kind that only rang when something catastrophic was happening. The admiral grabbed it on the first ring, listened for perhaps 15 seconds, and his face went pale. When he hung up, he looked directly at Nadia for the first time. "Captain Volkov, front and center. Now." She moved through the rows of seats with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable with being watched. The admiral's voice was grim when he spoke again. 17 minutes ago, a civilian Boeing 777 en route from Tokyo to San Francisco issued a hijack code. 432 souls on board. The aircraft is currently over the Pacific, descending rapidly. Every fighter we have is committed to the North Korean situation. Every pilot who isn't already in the air is at minimum 40 minutes from intercept range. He paused, his eyes locked on hers. "Except one." The silence in the room was absolute. Nadia felt her heartbeat steady, the way it always did when the chaos started making sense. "What's the threat assessment?" she asked. The admiral gestured to the tactical display screen behind him. "Unknown. Communications are garbled. We're getting pieces of transmissions, possible explosive device, possible structural failure, possible pilot incapacitation. The aircraft is headed toward restricted airspace over the naval base at trajectory that will put it into controlled descent in 12 minutes. Commander Hastings had gone very quiet. The admiral continued, his voice careful. The F-18 Super Hornet you were flying during the Okinawa incident is still in the hangar. It's technically under maintenance review, but it's flight capable. The question isn't about the aircraft. The question is about the pilot. He looked at her steadily. The Navy took your wings because you violated direct orders to break off pursuit of a hostile submarine contact. You pushed your aircraft beyond safety limits. You endangered yourself and potentially compromised the mission. Nadia said nothing. You also, the Admiral continued, successfully tracked that submarine for 47 minutes through conditions that grounded every other pilot in your squadron. Your flight data showed maneuvers that 3 separate review boards said were technically impossible, and the intelligence you gathered led to the interdiction of a weapons smuggling operation that had been running for 18 months. The tactical display updated, showing the civilian aircraft's projected path. It was getting closer to the base, closer to the city beyond. 432 people who were probably terrified, probably praying, probably wondering why the fighter jets they'd seen in movies weren't already there to save them. "So here's where we are, Captain," the Admiral said. "I can't order a grounded pilot to take a flight data-spending aircraft into a potentially hostile intercept situation. That would be career suicide for both of us. But I can tell you that there are 432 civilians about to die, and you're the only pilot in range." He waited. The room waited. Nadia thought about her daughter, 12 years old, living with her ex-husband in Virginia Beach because deployment schedules and military custody arrangements didn't mix. She thought about the Okinawa incident, about the moment she'd pushed her Super Hornet into a dive that had her RIO screaming abort commands, while she chased a sonar ghost through a storm that had waves breaking over the aircraft carrier's deck. She thought about the 8 weeks of administrative review, the quiet suggestions that maybe it was time to transition to a training role, the knowing looks from younger pilots who saw her as a cautionary tale about pushing too hard for too long. Then she thought about 432 people who didn't care about Navy politics or career trajectories, or whether Captain Nadia Volkov had violated regulations. They just wanted to live. "I need a RIO," she said. "Lieutenant Chen is qualified," the Admiral began. "No," Nadia interrupted. "I need someone who understands what I do and why I do it. I need someone who won't question the maneuvers." A voice came from the back of the room. "I'll fly with her." Everyone turned. Lieutenant Kara Dryden stood up slowly. She was 26, fresh out of advanced tactical training with exactly 7 months of fleet experience. She was also the only other woman in the room. "Lieutenant, you don't have to," the Admiral started. "I know what she did at Okinawa, sir," Kara said clearly. "I read the after-action reports. I read the flight data. What Captain Volkov did wasn't reckless. It was necessary. And if she's going up against an unknown threat to save 400 people, she needs a RIO who trusts her completely." Nadia turned to study the younger woman. She saw determination there, but also something else, a kind of hunger to prove that she belonged in this world of controlled violence and split-second decisions. She recognized it because she'd worn the same expression 20 years ago. "Can you handle high-G maneuvers without blacking out?" Nadia asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Can you run targeting solutions while pulling 9GS and maintain communications protocol?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you trust me to do things that will scare the hell out of you and still follow my commands without hesitation?" Kara met her eyes. "Try me." The Admiral looked between them, then at the tactical display, then at his watch. "You have 8 minutes until that civilian aircraft enters restricted airspace. If it continues on current trajectory, I will have no choice but to authorize defensive measures." He didn't say the words, but everyone in the room understood. 432 people would die because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time in an aircraft that looked on radar like a potential weapon. Nadia nodded once. "We're gone." She and Kara were already moving toward the door when the Admiral's voice stopped them. "Captain Volkov, the Okinawa incident investigation isn't closed. If you take this flight, everything you do will be recorded and reviewed. If you deviate from standard intercept protocols, if you endanger yourself or your RIO, I won't be able to protect you. Your career will be over." Nadia looked back at him. Admiral, my career ended the moment I cared more about doing the job right than keeping my rank. I'm okay with that. They ran. The hangar was half a mile from the briefing center, but Nadia covered the distance in what felt like seconds, her mind already shifting into the space where training became instinct. Kara kept pace beside her, breathing hard but maintaining focus. The Super Hornet waited in Hangar 7 like a predator at rest. Even sitting still, the F-18 radiated menace 44,000 pounds of titanium, avionics, and controlled fury designed for one purpose: to dominate the sky. The aircraft's gray paint scheme absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making it seem to pulse with latent energy. Maintenance Chief Daniels saw them coming and immediately started barking orders to his crew. "Fuel status," Nadia called out as she reached the aircraft. "92%, Captain." "We were running diagnostics on the weapons systems. Are the missiles live?" "Yes, ma'am, but the targeting computer is still. I'll work around it. Pre-flight checklist now." The next 4 minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. Nadia and Kara climbed into the cockpit with practiced efficiency, hands moving through checks that had been drilled into muscle memory through thousands of hours of training. Straps, helmet, communications, oxygen, weapons system, navigation. Each item confirmed, each system coming online with soft electronic chimes that sounded like a mechanical heartbeat. Chief Daniels appeared at the side of the cockpit, his weathered face grim. "Captain, the brass is going to crucify you for this." Nadia pulled her visor down. "Chief, the brass has been trying to crucify me since I walked into Bud S training. I'm still here. They're not." She saw him smile despite himself. "Give 'em hell, Valkyrie," that call sign. She'd earned it during her third deployment, after pulling off a combat air patrol mission that had her maintaining station for 11 hours through a sandstorm with equipment failures, keeping hostile aircraft from reaching a marine position that was taking heavy fire. Someone had joked that she was like a Norse goddess choosing who lived and died. The name stuck. The canopy lowered with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them into their own private world of heads-up displays and weapon status indicators. Nadia's hands moved across the controls with the easy confidence of someone who had become one with the machine. "Tower, this is Valkyrie 1, requesting emergency takeoff clearance." The tower controller's voice came back immediately. "Valkyrie 1, you are cleared for immediate takeoff. Runway 26 right. Civilian aircraft is now 6 minutes from restricted airspace. Current heading 270, altitude descending through 17,000 feet. Good hunting." The Super Hornet's engine spooled up with a rising scream that made the hangar walls vibrate. Nadia released the brakes and felt 40,000 pounds of thrust press her back into her seat as the fighter leaped forward. The runway became a gray blur. The edge of the Pacific appeared ahead, blue and endless. The nose lifted. Gravity became a suggestion rather than a law. They climbed at a 70-degree angle, acceleration crushing them into their seats with nearly 6 gs of force as the Hawaiian coastline fell away below. Kara's voice came through the helmet communications, slightly strained but steady. "Valkyrie 1 is airborne, heading 275 to intercept. Distance to target 43 nautical miles." Nadia leveled out at 22,000 feet and pushed the throttles to maximum military power. The Super Hornet responded like a thoroughbred given its head, engine temperature climbing toward the red line as they accelerated through the sound barrier. The shock wave they left behind would rattle windows in Honolulu. "Valkyrie 1, be advised target aircraft is not responding to radio contact. We're picking up intermittent emergency locator transmissions but no voice communications." That was wrong. Commercial pilots were trained to communicate constantly during emergencies. Radio silence meant something catastrophic had happened in that cockpit. Nadia checked her weapons display. 4 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders. Enough firepower to destroy anything in the sky. Enough to kill 432 people if she made the wrong call. "Talk to me about that aircraft," she said to Kara. "Boeing 777, registration November 732 Quebec Alpha. 328 passengers, 12 crew, flying Tokyo to San Francisco. Departed on schedule, no mechanical issues reported. Flight crew is experienced, captain, has 18,000 hours. So what made them go silent? Nadia asked. Equipment failure, cockpit decompression, hostile takeover, take your pick. The radar screen in front of Nadia showed a single contact, heading roughly east toward the Hawaiian Islands and the naval base beyond. Closing distance, 37 nautical miles. She did the math in her head. At their current speeds, intercept in approximately 4 minutes. Valkyrie 1, be advised you are cleared to intercept and assess. Use visual confirmation protocols. Do not engage unless you have positive confirmation of hostile intent. The Admiral's voice came through on a separate channel, quiet enough that only Nadia could hear. Captain, I'm trusting you to make the right call, but understand that if that aircraft continues toward the base, I will authorize weapons release. If you're too close when that happens, I can't protect you from the blast. Nadia didn't respond. She pushed the Super Hornet harder, feeling the airframe shudder slightly as they exceeded design specifications. The aircraft was rated for 7.5 GS in sustained maneuvers. She was pulling 8. Below them, the Pacific stretched in every direction like hammered metal under the afternoon sun. At this altitude, the curvature of the Earth was visible, the horizon bending away in a gentle arc that reminded her why she flew. Up here, the politics and bureaucracy and career considerations fell away. Up here, there was only the mission and the machine and the moment. Contact, Kara announced. 11 o'clock, 22 miles. Altitude 15,000 and descending. Airspeed 280 knots. Nadia adjusted course slightly, bringing the Super Hornet into a pursuit vector that would allow her to match speed and altitude with the civilian aircraft. Flying formation with a Boeing 777 in a fighter jet was like asking a cheetah to keep pace with an elephant, technically possible but fundamentally awkward. Tower, Valkyrie 1 is beginning visual approach. Estimated intercept in 90 seconds. The civilian aircraft appeared as a distant speck against the clouds, growing larger as they closed the distance. Nadia throttled back, bleeding off speed as they approached from behind and below. The massive passenger jet filled her vision, its white fuselage marked with the red and blue livery of the airline. She brought the Super Hornet up alongside the Boeing's left wing, close enough to see the rivets in the aluminum skin. This was the moment of truth. If there were hijackers aboard, if someone was flying that aircraft as a weapon, she would see evidence of it. Erratic flight patterns, damage to the cockpit windows, some visual indicator that would justify what might happen next. Instead, she saw nothing unusual. The aircraft was in a steady descent, controlled and purposeful. The cockpit windows showed no movement, no signs of struggle, just darkness. Tower, visual contact confirms aircraft is intact. No external damage visible. Cockpit appears dark, but I cannot confirm crew status. The Admiral's voice came back. Valkyrie 1, attempt radio contact on emergency frequency. Nadia switched channels. Tokyo, San Francisco, Flight 747. This is United States Navy fighter aircraft off your left wing. If you can hear this transmission, rock your wings. Silence. The big Boeing continued its steady descent, now passing through 12,000 feet. Nadia pulled closer until the Super Hornet's wingtip was perhaps 50 feet from the civilian aircraft's fuselage. Passengers would be able to see her through the windows if they looked out. She could see them now, faces pressed against the glass. Some were waving frantically. Others had phones out taking pictures. None of them looked terrified. They looked confused, hopeful, like they thought she was there to save them. Tower, I have visual on passengers. They appear conscious and responsive. No signs of panic consistent with hijacking scenario. Kara was already working the problem in the back seat, her voice tight with concentration. If the crew is incapacitated but the passengers are okay, we're looking at cockpit-specific event. Decompression, toxic fumes, something that affected the flight deck but not the cabin. The Boeing continued descending. 10,000 feet. 8,000. The restricted airspace boundary was approaching fast. Nadia could see the Hawaiian coastline ahead now, the green mountains rising up from the blue Pacific. Somewhere down there, the Admiral was watching radar returns and checking his watch and calculating the point of no return. Valkyrie 1, target aircraft has 90 seconds to restricted airspace boundary. I need a recommendation. Nadia's mind raced through the possibilities. 432 people who weren't panicking, weren't fighting, weren't doing anything except watching her fly alongside them, and hopping she represented rescue instead of destruction. A cockpit gone dark, an experienced crew that had stopped communicating, an aircraft in a controlled descent that would end in approximately 4 minutes with impact into the Pacific Ocean or catastrophic collision with the naval base or the city beyond. "Tower, I'm going to try something," she said. The Admiral's voice was sharp. "Valkyrie 1, clarify your intentions." Nadia didn't answer. She pulled ahead of the Boeing, positioning the Super Hornet directly in front of the massive passenger jet's nose. Then she toggled her communications to the international emergency frequency that every commercial aircraft monitored automatically. "Flight 747, if your cockpit is compromised but your cabin crew can hear this, I need you to establish communication. Use a cell phone if you have to. Call 911. Call the airline. Call anyone and tell them Navy fighter says cockpit is dead and you need ground support now." She waited. Nothing. 60 seconds to restricted airspace. She made a decision that would probably end her career but might save 432 lives. She lit her afterburners. The twin tails of flame that erupted from the Super Hornet's engines were visible for miles. More importantly, they were impossible to ignore. She held position directly in front of the Boeing for 5 seconds, letting the passengers see exactly what 30,000 pounds of thrust looked like, then pulled up and away in a climbing barrel roll that took her above and behind the aircraft again. Her radio crackled. This is Flight Attendant Marcus Chen aboard Tokyo San Francisco 747. I'm calling from a passenger's phone. The pilots aren't responding. The cockpit door is locked and we can't get it open. We've been trying for 20 minutes. Please help us." Nadia felt something unlock in her chest. Not a hijacking, not a weapon, just a crisis that needed solving. "Marcus, this is Navy Captain Volkov. I'm in the fighter jet off your left wing. Can you see me?" Yes, we can see you." The relief in his voice was palpable. "What do we do? The plane is descending and we can't stop it." Kara was already on the tactical frequency with the tower, relaying information. Nadia kept her voice calm, the way she'd learned to do during SEAL training when instructors were screaming in her face and telling her to quit. "Marcus, I need you to stay calm and listen carefully. The aircraft is on autopilot and descending toward the ocean. If the pilots are unconscious or incapacitated, we need to get someone into that cockpit now. Can you get the door open? We've tried everything. It won't budge." The restricted airspace boundary was 30 seconds away. Nadia looked at the Boeing, at the faces pressed against windows, at the beautiful machine that was following its programming into disaster, because the humans who were supposed to control it couldn't. She thought about the Okinawa incident, about the moment she'd realized that following orders would mean losing the submarine contact and letting a weapons shipment disappear into the Pacific. She thought about the choice between career and mission. It had never really been a choice. "Tower, Valkyrie 1 is declaring emergency authorization under Federal Aviation Regulation Part 119. I am directing Flight 747 to deviate from current course under military intercept protocols." The tower's response was immediate and horrified. "Valkyrie 1, you are not authorized to." She switched off that frequency. To the flight attendant, she said, "Marcus, I need you to find someone on that aircraft who has flight experience. Private pilot, student pilot, flight simulator enthusiast, I don't care. Someone who understands basic aircraft controls." There was muffled conversation on the other end of the line. Kara's voice came through the helmet communications, tight with stress. "Nadia, if you take control of that aircraft's navigation, you're going to face court-martial. This isn't like Okinawa. This is giving orders to a civilian aircraft in U.S. airspace." "I know," Nadia said quietly. Marcus came back on the line. "We have a passenger who says he's a retired Air Force pilot, flew cargo planes. He says he can try to fly this thing if we can get him into the cockpit." "What's his name?" "Robert McAllister, Colonel, retired." Nadia smiled despite the situation. Of course it was a colonel. The universe had a sense of humor, Put him on. A different voice came through, older but steady. This is McAllister. I flew C5s for 23 years, but I've never touched a 777. The systems are going to be completely different from what I know. Colonel, this is Captain Nadia Volkov, call sign Valkyrie. I need you to get into that cockpit and take manual control of the aircraft. I'll talk you through it. The door is reinforced. We can't break it down. Nadia checked her position. The Boeing was now inside restricted airspace, descending through 5,000 feet. Below them, she could see the naval base, the city, the thousands of people who had no idea they might be about to die. Colonel McAllister, in the galley there should be an emergency equipment panel. Inside, there's a crash axe. The cockpit door is reinforced, but it's not impenetrable. You need to breach that door now. The Admiral's voice came through on the command frequency, overriding her communications blackout. Valkyrie 1, you are ordered to break off intercept and return to base. I am authorizing weapons release on target aircraft. You have 60 seconds to clear the area. Nadia felt the world narrow to a single point of absolute clarity. 60 seconds, 432 people, one decision. She looked at the Boeing, at the passengers who were watching her fighter jet with hope and fear and the desperate faith that someone in authority would save them. She thought about her daughter, about trying to explain why she'd followed orders and let 400 people die when she could have saved them. She thought about the SEAL instructors who had told her she didn't belong, that women couldn't handle the pressure, that she would quit. She thought about proving them wrong every single day for 20 years. Tower, Valkyrie 1 is not breaking off intercept. Weapons release is not authorized, and I am countermanding that order under emergency military authority. If you want to shoot down that aircraft, you'll have to shoot through me first. The silence on the radio was absolute. Then Kara's voice, quiet and certain. Valkyrie 2 confirms, we're not leaving them. The 60 seconds ticked down. Nadia maintained formation with the Boeing, her Super Hornet positioned between the civilian aircraft and the naval base, between 432 lives and a missile launch that would end them. She could hear the sounds on the cell phone connection shouting, the metallic crash of an axe against reinforced door, Marcus Chen's voice organizing passengers to help with the breaching attempt. The Boeing descended through 3,000 feet. At this altitude and rate of descent, they had maybe 90 seconds before impact with the ground. The cockpit door must have been designed to withstand almost anything. Military-grade locks, ballistic paneling, the post-9/11 security measures that were meant to prevent exactly what was happening now. But they hadn't accounted for a retired Air Force colonel with a crash axe and 432 people whose lives depended on getting through that barrier. We're through, McAllister's voice was breathless. Jesus Christ, both pilots are unconscious, slumped over. I'm pulling them out of the seats now. Colonel, get into the left seat. Put on the headset. Tell me what you see. She could hear him moving, grunting with effort as he manhandled an unconscious pilot. Okay, I'm in. The autopilot is engaged and showing descent mode. Altitude is, God, we're at 2,000 feet. Airspeed 240 knots. Look at the throttles, should be in the center console. You'll see 2 levers. I see them, they're at idle. Push them forward to 60%. Now, pushing. Okay, they're at 60. Engine noise is increasing. The Boeing's descent rate slowed, not much but enough. They were buying time. Nadia checked her altitude, then looked at the ground below. They were over the urban area now, residential neighborhoods where people were in their yards, on their porches, going about their Monday afternoon unaware that 100 tons of aircraft was descending toward them. Colonel, the autopilot is following its programmed descent. We need to disconnect it and take manual control. See the red button on the yoke, the control column in front of you. I see it. Red button marked AP disconnect. Press it and hold for 3 seconds. She heard the button click through the phone connection. Immediately, an alarm started blaring in the Boeing's cockpit, a warning that the autopilot had disengaged and the aircraft was now solely under manual control. McAllister's voice was tight. Autopilot is off. Controls feel heavy. This thing is huge compared to what I flew. You're doing fine, Colonel. Pull back on the yoke. Gentle pressure. We need to level off and start climbing. The Boeing's nose came up slowly like a whale surfacing. Nadia watched the altimeter. 1,500 feet, 1,400, 1,300. The climb started. 1,200, 1,200. Holding, then 1,250, 1,300. The ground that had been rushing up to meet them started falling away again. Tower Valkyrie 1 reports target aircraft is under manual control with qualified pilot at the helm. Crisis is contained. Repeat, crisis is contained. The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. Then the Admiral's voice, carefully neutral. Valkyrie 1 reports status of civilian flight crew. Both pilots unconscious, cause unknown. Recommend immediate medical airlift preparation and emergency landing clearance at Hickam. Valkyrie 1, stand by. Nadia knew what that meant. Somewhere in the base command center, people were deciding how to handle a Navy captain who had just told a 3-star admiral to go to hell and placed herself between a civilian aircraft and authorized weapons release. They would be pulling up her file, seeing the Okinawa incident, seeing the pattern of a pilot who couldn't follow orders when those orders conflicted with her judgment. Kara's voice came through the internal communications. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both, Nadia said. She guided the Super Hornet back into formation with the Boeing, taking up a position off its right wing. The two aircraft flew together like an illustration of contrasts, the sleek Predator and the graceful cargo hauler, military and civilian, war machine and peace machine, both serving their purpose under the same sky. Colonel McAllister's voice came through again. Captain Volkov, I've got this beast leveled at 2,000 feet, but I'm going to need help landing it. These systems are nothing like what I trained on. You're going to do just fine, Colonel, I've got you. For the next 12 minutes, Nadia talked Robert McAllister through the process of flying a Boeing 777. She explained the primary flight display, the navigation system, the airspeed indicators. She had him run through basic maneuvers, gentle turns, slight altitude changes, while she maintained formation, and Kara coordinated with the tower to clear airspace and prepare emergency response teams. The passengers, visible through the windows, had transitioned from terror to cautious hope. Some were still filming. Some were crying. Most were just staring at the fighter jet that had appeared out of nowhere and refused to leave them. The tower finally came back with landing clearance and coordinates. The Admiral's voice was carefully controlled. Valkyrie 1, escort the aircraft to runway 08 left. Emergency crews are standing by. We'll deal with the other matters after everyone is safely on the ground. Translation: you're not off the hook, but we're not going to let 432 people die because of inter-service politics. Nadia acknowledged and turned her attention back to McAllister. Colonel, we're going to set you up for a straightened approach. The aircraft has an instrument landing system that will give you guidance, but you're going to need to manually control the throttles and the descent rate. Understood, I'm ready. Except he wasn't, not really. Landing a Boeing 777 was a complex dance of thrust management, descent rate, flap configuration, and speed control that took years to master. McAllister had minutes. Nadia pulled ahead of the Boeing and began a slow descent, giving him a visual reference. Follow me down. Match my rate of descent. I'll be your guide slope. They descended together through scattered clouds, the Super Hornet leading and the massive passenger jet following like a student mimicking a teacher. Nadia called out instructions constantly: throttle adjustments, flap settings, landing gear deployment. She could hear the strain in McAllister's voice as he fought to control an aircraft that was trying to follow its own aerodynamic preferences rather than his commands. 500 feet the runway appeared ahead, a strip of concrete that looked impossibly narrow for the Boeing's wingspan. The Super Hornet was designed to land on aircraft carriers on strips barely longer than the jet itself. This was a spacious runway by her standards. For McAllister, it probably looked like threading a needle while riding a bull. You're high on the approach, reduce throttle 2%, increase descent rate. The Boeing dropped lower. You're fast. Airspeed should be 155 knots. You're showing 170. The engine's roar changed pitch as McAllister adjusted. Gear down and locked. Flaps at 40 degrees. Looking good, Colonel. At 200 feet, Nadia pulled up and away, banking hard left to give the Boeing clear airspace. This was McAllister's moment now. Either he would land the aircraft or he wouldn't, and there was nothing more she could do except watch. The Boeing descended the final 100 feet with all the grace of a falling refrigerator, but it was controlled. The main landing gear touched first with a screech of rubber that was probably harder than any commercial landing in history. Then the nose gear slammed down with enough force to blow 2 tires. The aircraft bounced once, settled, and began decelerating as McAllister deployed the thrust reversers. It rolled out for perhaps a mile before finally coming to a stop in the middle of the runway, surrounded by emergency vehicles with lights flashing. Through her radio, Nadia could hear cheering. From the tower, she received a curt, "Valkyrie 1, return to base and report to the commander immediately." She brought the Super Hornet around in a slow circle over the airfield, watching the emergency crews swarm the Boeing. Medical personnel were boarding through the emergency exits. Passengers were being evacuated down emergency slides. 2 ambulances were already racing toward the aircraft to collect the unconscious pilots. 432 people who would go home tonight and tell stories about the day they almost died and the fighter jet that wouldn't leave them. Nadia turned toward the base, toward whatever consequences were waiting. Kara's voice came through, quiet and serious. "They're going to court-martial you. You know that, right? You countermanded a 3-star admiral's direct order. You threatened to engage U.S. forces to protect a civilian aircraft. You violated about 19 different regulations. I know. Was it worth it?" Nadia thought about the faces pressed against windows, about Colonel McAllister's voice as he fought to control an aircraft he'd never been trained to fly, about Marcus Chen organizing passengers to breach a door that wasn't supposed to be breachable. She thought about her daughter, who would one day ask what her mother did during her time in uniform. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It was worth it." They landed at Hickam 20 minutes later. The maintenance crew was waiting, along with a security escort and Commander Hastings, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Nadia climbed out of the cockpit and removed her helmet with the same methodical precision she'd used for 20 years. The trident on her chest caught the late afternoon sunlight. Hastings approached with 2 security personnel flanking him. "Captain Volkov, you are ordered to report to Admiral Reeves immediately. Your flight status is suspended pending a full investigation. You are to surrender your wings and your security clearance." Nadia unclipped the gold wings from her uniform and held them for a moment. 20 years of flying. 6 years before that as a SEAL. Deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Horn of Africa, the South China Sea. Missions that couldn't be talked about, operations that had saved lives and ended others, decisions made in split seconds that echoed through years. She handed the wings to Hastings, then unpinned her SEAL trident and added it to his palm. His hand trembled slightly under the weight of what he was taking. "Sir, respectfully," Nadia said, "those 432 people don't care about regulations. They care that someone showed up when they needed help." Hastings looked at her for a long moment. "Captain, off the record, I hope they give you a medal. On the record, I have to take you into custody." She nodded. "I understand." But before the security personnel could move, a commotion erupted at the hangar entrance. News crews were arriving, drawn by the emergency landing and the rumors that were already spreading through the base. Behind them, moving faster, was a group of people in civilian clothes, looking disheveled and emotional. The passengers from Flight 747. Marcus Chen was in front, still wearing his flight attendant uniform, practically running toward the maintenance area. The security detail moved to intercept, but Marcus was already shouting, "That's her, that's the pilot, that's Valkyrie." The crowd of passengers, maybe 30 of them, the ones who had been cleared by medics and released, surged forward. Security tried to maintain a perimeter, but it was like trying to stop a tide with a broom. Marcus Chen reached Nadia first. He was young, maybe 27, with tears streaming down his face. "You saved us. You stayed with us. When everyone else was telling us we were going to die, you were right there." An older woman pushed through next, her gray hair disheveled, her eyes fierce. "My grandchildren are flying in tomorrow. I'm going to get to see them because of you." A businessman in a rumpled suit still clutching his carry-on bag. "I have a daughter getting married next month. You gave me the chance to walk her down the aisle." They kept coming, one after another, their stories tumbling out in a rush of emotion and gratitude. The teenager who was heading to college in California, the couple on their 40th anniversary trip, the mother with a 6-month-old baby, the teacher who had spent the entire descent preparing to die and was still trying to process the fact that he was alive. Colonel McAllister appeared last, moving more slowly, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. He walked right up to Nadia and saluted a perfect military salute that she automatically returned even though she was no longer supposed to have the authority to receive one. "Captain Volkov, I've been flying for 37 years. I've never experienced anything like that. The way you talked me down, you made the impossible feel possible." Nadia's throat was tight. "You did the hard part, Colonel. You got into that seat and took control. Because you told me I could." The news cameras were rolling now, capturing everything. Hastings stood frozen, still holding her wings and trident, looking like a man who had just realized he was on the wrong side of history. Then Lieutenant Kara Dryden appeared at Nadia's side, her flight suit still marked with the stress lines of high-G maneuvers. She looked at Hastings, at the security detail, at the crowd of grateful passengers. "For the record, sir, everything Captain Volkov did up there was necessary and appropriate. I witnessed it all from the backseat and I would testify to that at any hearing." "Lieutenant, you don't have to." Nadia started. "Yes, I do." Kara's voice was firm. "Because if we punish pilots for saving lives when they break regulations, we're sending a message that following procedure is more important than the mission. And I didn't join the Navy to follow procedures. I joined to protect people." The crowd of passengers erupted in applause. More were arriving from the terminal, word spreading through the base about what had happened. Admiral Reeves appeared at the edge of the maintenance area, flanked by 2 other officers. The crowd parted for him like a wave. He took in the scene, the passengers, the news cameras, Hastings holding the wings, Nadia standing at attention, Kara beside her. His face was unreadable. "Commander Hastings, return Captain Volkov's insignia to her immediately." Hastings's jaw dropped. "Sir, regulations require." "I'm aware of the regulations, Commander. I'm also aware that Captain Volkov just saved 432 lives using skill, judgment, and courage that exemplify everything we want in a naval officer. Return her insignia. Now." Hastings moved forward slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he pinned the wings and trident back onto Nadia's uniform. The crowd applauded again, louder this time. The Admiral stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Nadia could hear. "Captain, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about the chain of command and what it means to countermand a direct order from a flag officer. But that conversation will happen in private, and it will happen after the news cycle moves on. For right now, officially, you conducted a textbook emergency intercept and assist operation that saved numerous civilian lives. Your flight status is restored and the Okinawa investigation is closed. Unofficially." He paused, and for just a moment his stern expression cracked into something that might have been a smile. "Unofficially, that was the most spectacular display of airmanship and moral courage I've seen in 35 years of service. Well done, Valkyrie." The next several hours were a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and interviews with investigators who were trying to figure out what had happened to the Boeing's flight crew. The answer, when it emerged, was both simple and terrifying. A malfunctioning air circulation system had been slowly filling the cockpit with carbon monoxide. Both pilots had succumbed to hypoxia without realizing what was happening. The cockpit door, designed to prevent exactly the kind of breach that had saved the passengers, had nearly doomed them instead. By sunset,